Hello world, and thanks for joining me. My name is Mohit Deshpande, and in this course we'll be constructing recurrent neural networks, particularly for language modeling. So recurrent neural networks are what we use to model variable length sequences, and we can do a lot of fun things with these guys. So you see on the bottom, I've trained a recurrent neural network on Shakespeare, all of Shakespeare's different sonnets. And what we can actually have this recurrent network do is kind of learn a little bit about how sonnets and Shakespeare sonnets are written. We can actually ask it to generate new text, and so that's what we're going to be doing for the purpose of learning recurrent neural networks. An application of this is to see what kind of different text that we can use a recurrent neural network to generate. So on the bottom left, there is some text that have actually been generated from a neural network. So it started with just complete random knowledge of nothing, trained on Shakespeare's sonnets, and you can see it's producing text that kind of sounds like Shakespeare would have written it. And another fun thing application that we'll be doing is also applying the same kind of recurrent neural network to code itself. And so you can see on the bottom right, we've actually trained a recurrent neural network to write code. That's really awesome. Now the code that it produces isn't necessarily the best, but if we kept on training it and kept on giving it more data, it would produce some really nice code. And so we're going to be discussing recurrent neural networks and how we can actually do this kind of text generation stuff with recurrent neural networks. So for the first thing that we have to discuss is called language modeling, and that's how we can actually figure out whether an arrangement of words in a sentence actually makes sense or not. So if you just take random words and put them in a sentence like cat, dog, gold, yellow, that's going to be not a good sentence. If we had a better constructed sentence, then our language model is going to like that more. And so we can tell our model to say, well, let's prefer sentences that actually make sense. And so that's kind of the task of language modeling, and we're going to be first have to discuss that, and then we can start getting into exactly what recurrent neural networks are and how we train these guys. And because they're a kind of neural network, we can use backpropagation to help train these guys. So after we trained our network, after it's seen a lot of Shakespeare, a lot of code, now the question is, how can we ask it to produce kind of what it's learned? And so that's what the task of text generation is, and so we'll be discussing text generation as well. And kind of towards the end, we're going to be discussing two very recent and modern architectures called long short-term memory and gated recurrent units. And both of these guys are still used by state-of-the-art. Both are considered quite state-of-the-art to this day. So all the stuff that you're going to be discussing here is very recent, and guys in industry and research use LSTMs and GRUs. So we'll be discussing all of this recent stuff kind of towards the end as well. We've been making courses since 2012, and we're super excited to have you on board. Online courses are a fantastic way to learn new skills, and I take a lot of online courses myself. Zenva courses consist mainly of video lessons that you can watch at your own pace and as many times as you want. We also have downloadable source code and project files, and they contain everything that we'll build in the lessons. It's really recommended that you code along with me and follow along with the demos, because in my opinion that's the best way to learn something, in my experience, is by actually getting your hands dirty and working with it. Lastly, we've seen that students who get the most out of these online courses are those who make a weekly plan and stick with it, depending of course on your own availability and learning style. At Zenva, we've taught programming and game development to over 200,000 students through over 50 courses since 2012. Some of these students have used the skills that they've learned to advance their careers, to start their own company, or to publish their own apps and games. Thanks for joining, and I look forward to seeing all the cool stuff that you'll be building. Now, without further ado, let's get started.